Mr. Tom Donahue, who represents Lewis Harris Associates in this matter and who conducted this survey. Mr. Donahue.
Before we begin with the highlights of the report, I'd like to explain how the sample was drawn and how Lewis Harris conducts a poll so that you have some idea of the care and scientific rigor with which we work. The phone calls were made during the first and second week of June, and there were 800 completed interviews made. The process by which we make telephone interviews is called random digit dialing. And what random digit dialing does is it ensures through a computerized process that every person with a telephone, whether or not he is listed in telephone directory, has an equal chance of being in the sample. Because we know that the economically disadvantaged, blacks, Hispanics, and other minority groups have fewer telephones than typically is found in white middle class sections, what we do is weight the results to reflect their distribution in the population. So while we do not have as many blacks or Hispanics in the sample, the results that we have been weighted in order to reflect their distribution in the population. For those of you who have books, we will be following along in the book, and I will be hitting the highlights. After the highlights and after we've talked through the report, I'll be very happy to answer any questions that you may have. First of all, if you will turn to page 4 in the booklet that's been handed out, you'll notice we have overall results. Before I go through those, I should tell you what the objectives of the survey were. The objectives were threefold. The first of the objectives was to survey attitudes toward marijuana legislation by Dade County residents. Second objective was to survey people's attitudes, perceptions, and ideas of what and how serious certain drugs and drug usage were and is in Dade County. And the third was to survey people's awareness and attitudes toward the Coptic Church. So if you'll notice, in section 1, on page 4, those were surveyed overall attitudes toward current legislation. We found, under attitudes toward current legislation, that residents of Dade County are divided on the issue of marijuana possession. While nearly half feel that present penalties are too harsh, 44% favor harsher penalties or retaining the present law. Secondly, generally, people are not in favor of legalizing the sale of marijuana. Nearly 6 in 10 people report that they do not favor the legalization of marijuana, but they do not want to be overly harsh in dealing with those people who use it. Nearly 1 in 3 people report having used marijuana at some time, and only 1 in 10 in this sample currently uses marijuana. If you'll notice in that, we say that that is a figure that is probably very, very conservative, underrepresented, because marijuana is still against the law. So people would be hesitant to report that they are still using. Over 8 in 10 Dade County residents favor the use of marijuana for the treatment of serious illnesses, and would certainly favor further research, medical research, to determine if it has, that is to suggest marijuana, has applications beyond its present limited role. The overall findings in section 2, these were findings with regard to the problems inherent in alcohol use, hard drug and illegal drug use, as well as marijuana use. You'll notice that under point A, people in Dade County feel that alcohol and marijuana are serious problems in today's society. When comparing alcohol and marijuana, residents feel that alcohol is a substantially more dangerous problem. Illegal drugs, as well as over-the-counter drugs or prescription drugs, are viewed as posing substantial health hazards. Expectedly, heroin, barbiturates, and amphetamines are most disapproved of, while marijuana, sleeping pills, and tranquilizers are perceived as posing a less serious problem. In the third section, which we were looking at people's attitudes and awareness of the Coptic Church, typically people in Dade County perceive that religious toleration is on the rise, or at least not on the decline in Dade County. That was a question that we wanted to find out in light of the unfortunate incident at Jonestown, which is tending people in America to be somewhat suspicious of unconventional religious groups. However, most people do not favor the federal government granting a legal exemption to religious groups who use marijuana as a sacrament in their services, and we will look at that in some detail in a moment. We find that people are suspicious of unconventional religious groups because a majority feel that such groups should be monitored or closely watched. And again, we feel that this distrust may be due to the unfortunate incidents that happened last year. 8 in 10 people have heard of the Coptic Church, but fewer than 1 in 10 of these people understand the church's stated mission. Almost equal proportions of Dade County residents cite TV news, newspapers as their initial sources of information about the Coptic Church, and a substantial number of the opinion that the media coverage of the Coptic Church and its activities has been unfavorable. Okay, if you will turn to page 7, we'll get into some detail about attitudes toward the possession of marijuana. We found that the residents of Dade County were divided on the issue of marijuana possession, and most have formed an opinion of the appropriateness of the current Florida laws regarding possession. If you'll notice, nearly half, or 47%, find that the present penalties for possession are too harsh, while 23% would like to see heavier penalties for possession. Roughly 1/5, or 21%, of the adults surveyed feel that the present Florida law for possession should remain as it is, and those who are content with the present laws tend to be 35 to 44 years old and people who have not completed high school. People most likely to call for the elimination of all penalties for possession include 25 to 34-year-olds, people with college education, those with household incomes between $75,000 and $15,000, and those people who make $25,000 or over. 23% of the total Dade County residents survey would like to see possession of any amount of marijuana possession punished by a jail term. The less lenient attitude toward possession is reflected mainly among residents with household incomes of $7,500 or less, those who did not complete high school, Hispanics, and blacks. Attitudes toward the sale of marijuana. We found that the majority of people think that the sale of marijuana should not be legalized. Nearly 6 in 10, or 58%, report they would not be in favor, while 35% favor legalizing marijuana sales. Somewhat surprisingly, the youngest people were not the most liberal on this issue, and that surprised us. Rather, over half, 51% of the people, 25 to 34, favor the legalization of marijuana sales, while over half of the liberals and 45% of those making between $75,000 and $15,000 favor the legalization of sales. Now, what we have here is a trend that I want you to begin to watch as we go through the report. What you're seeing is a very up-tempo group. Those people who have attended college at least and intend to be college graduates, those people who are making more than the median income, and those people who consider themselves to be liberals and who tend to be white middle class are printing themselves out as the most lenient in this particular sample. And you will see that trend as we go through the results, and you might want to make notes of that so that you can ask questions with regard to them. Attitudes toward the use of marijuana was a question designed to find out if we should not legalize the sale or the cultivation, but just the use of marijuana. 38% report that it should be legalized, that is the use, while 53% report that they would not favor its legalization. Again, among those most in favor of legalization are those between 25 and 34, the group I just mentioned. Those with incomes between $75,000 and $15,000, 50%, and those who have had some college. And again, expectedly liberals, people who describe themselves as liberals. Those who feel most strongly about not legalizing marijuana are those over 45 years of age, conservatives, those with household incomes of $7,500 or less, Hispanics, and those with some high school education or less. The related question asked people if they favored or opposed easing criminal penalties on people who used marijuana in their homes. Again, you'll see a liberalizing effect by these demographic categories that I mentioned. 49%, nearly half, favor easing the criminal penalties. People 34 years of age and under, 60% would like to see that decriminalized for people who use marijuana in their homes. Liberals, people with annual incomes of $25,000 or over, and those with some college. The most opposed, and again, you will find a very conservative element emerging in Dade County, at least in our survey results. Those most opposed to any kind of change, or those people who tend to want harsher penalties, are those with less than a high school education, tend to be poor in terms of economic household income, and again, we find the Hispanic and Black community are very conservative. If you will skip down to letter D on page 9, we then began to ask people in a series of questions designed to determine how, if they have ever used marijuana and if they were current users. Overall, 28% of Dade County residents report having used marijuana at some time, while 71% that they have not. Expectedly, those between the ages of 16 and 34 and those with some college education report the largest incidence. People over 45 and those who have not graduated from high school are least likely to have used marijuana. When asked if they were currently users of marijuana, only 11% of the respondents admit that they use it, while 87% report that they did not. Again, we think that the level of reportage at 11% is low, primarily because we were asking people to respond to a question in which they were admitting that they did something that was against the law. So we have no way of knowing how conservative those figures are, but we know that people tend to underreport. The next series of questions was designed to find out if people thought that marijuana should be used in treating illnesses. And the overall finding, as I said in the summary report, is that 8 in 10 people in Dade County favor using marijuana to treat serious illnesses, while over half would favor its use for less serious illnesses. That's 55% reported that they would favor using marijuana for less than glaucoma, less serious than cancer, while 85% of the people in Dade County favor research, that is medical research, to determine if marijuana has potential medical applications beyond its current uses. Again, if we look at subgroups, liberals, 88%, report the largest amount of support for using marijuana to treat nausea caused by chemotherapy and glaucoma. Middle of the roaders and conservatives tend not to be very far behind. 75% of them also would like to see marijuana used for those very serious illnesses. College graduates, 62%, and liberals, 65%, would be in favor of using marijuana to treat less serious illnesses. And again, conservatives at 43%, and those with less than a high school education at 38% were less willing, more conservative in the kinds of applications they would like to see for marijuana. To get at how people felt about marijuana, even if they did not use it themselves, we asked a series of one question and another question that was related to that, if they would turn a son or daughter in to the authorities if that son or daughter was found with a supply of marijuana in his or her room. The majority, 65%, report that they would not turn a son or daughter in. Among those least likely to turn a child in are those who had some college, those under 34, and with the percentages of nearly 80%. Among those people who reported they would turn in a child to the legal authorities were those people in the age groups of 45 to 64, conservatives, those that made less than $7,500, blacks, and those people who had a high school education or less. So you're getting a feeling of what we have in Dade County, I think, is a very conservative element that tends to be somewhat older, as you might guess. If you will turn to page 23, please. This was the section that dealt with how serious are the abuse and use of various substances. We had 6 questions designed to determine people's attitudes toward the dangers of marijuana, alcohol, and drug use. On page 25, you'll see that under alcohol use, there is rising concern expressed by most people regarding the use of alcohol. This is not just a Dade County phenomenon. We find that over the country, people are reporting significantly larger percentages of concern about alcohol and alcohol abuse as a problem. If you'll notice that 94% of the people, overwhelming percentage, report that alcohol and the drinking and use of alcoholic beverages is a serious problem in America today. And you'll notice that 7 in 10 report that it is a very serious problem. We notice if you will look down at the last paragraph, people's responses in the 25 to 34 age category, that's that group again that we have been talking about time and time again throughout the survey, report the largest percentages of concern, and this is a time at which people's lives begin to stabilize, their drinking patterns begin to solidify themselves. Under letter B, when asked about marijuana use, 78% report that it is a moderate or serious problem, and of those, 52% believe it is a very serious problem. There are clear differences in opinion based on the demographic categories that we had in this survey. 80% of those people 45 and over say that it is a moderate or very serious problem, while 65% of those under 24 feel the same way. On page 26, you'll notice that 60% of the people who have had less than a high school education think that marijuana problem is very serious, compared with about 45% of those who have attended college or college graduates. Clearly, people with college experience tend to view the problem as less serious, but they still view it as a problem. Comparatively, people were asked which is more serious, the use of alcohol or the use of marijuana. Nearly 4 in 10, 40% feel that alcohol is more dangerous, while 3 in 10 believe marijuana poses the larger threat. A surprisingly large percentage, 22%, think that they're equally serious, while 13% aren't sure which of the two is the most serious. Again, those who did not graduate but attended college, 52%, felt that alcohol was the most dangerous, while high school and college graduates, 27%, feel more strongly about marijuana. We then asked some questions that had to do with the kinds of drugs that are legal and illegally obtained, not only in Dade County but throughout the country, and we asked them how much of a threat those particular drugs pose. Nearly 8 in 10 believe that typical prescription and non-prescription drugs found on the market that are currently available today pose health hazards, while only 1 in 10 do not perceive potential threats. I think you're seeing a growing awareness in America today, and Dade County is representative of this, of a distrust in just over-the-counter drugs and prescription drugs. People want more and more information and are requiring more and more information about the drugs and medicines that they take. To get a more specific picture of which drugs people felt were the most dangerous, they were asked whether they approve of people using various drugs. Expectedly, 90% disapprove of use of heroin and hallucinogens, 84% disapprove of cocaine, 78% disapprove of barbiturates, 77% disapprove of amphetamines, and 50% disapprove of sleeping pills and tranquilizers. And older people are the most disapproving than any other age groups. Again, people in Dade County, as in the national trends, are finding more and more potential threats in many of the medicines that are currently available today. Okay, the last section, if you will turn to page 34, and then page 35. This were the series of questions that we designed to find out the levels of awareness of the Coptic Church and people's feeling about various issues with which the Coptic Church has dealt with in the past. If you'll notice, the first section dealt with religious toleration. Dade County residents were optimistic in their estimation of the climate of religious toleration, in that 69% report that toleration is either on the rise or about the same in Dade County, while 18% report that it is diminishing. Among those who are the most optimistic are those with college degrees. 31% of them believe that it's on the rise, and those with the lowest level of education are the most pessimistic. 21% of those who did not graduate from high school believe that religious toleration is increasing. When asked how closely unconventional religious groups should be watched, the majority, 53%, indicate they think such groups should either be monitored or closely watched by the authorities. That is a trend that we will begin marking with our regular surveys in the future, I think, because it's an issue that has come to the fore, especially in light of the incidents at Jonestown last year. As expected, younger people, aged 16 to 34, are the most tolerant, and 53% report that religious groups ought to be left alone. 23% of those 65 and older express the belief that such groups should not be watched. As one might expect, older Americans are more conservative and more suspicious of religious groups' motives. Expectedly, conservatives and liberals are sharply divided on the issue. 51% of the liberals believe the religious group should not be monitored, while only 33% of the conservatives feel the same. Blacks and Hispanics were more liberal in this respect than the white middle class in believing that religious groups of an unconventional nature should be left alone. When asked whether the federal government should allow the use of marijuana as a sacrament, as it did with wine during Prohibition, most people overwhelmingly say no. 7 in 10 feel that such an exception should not be made, while only 24% think that it should. Younger people, again, and in that age group that we talked about before, are the most liberal on that issue. And the last section dealt with the Coptic Church specifically. One of the most surprising findings in the study, from our perspective, is that a large percentage of people, 82%, have heard of the Coptic Church. Moreover, the greatest awareness is found in the 45 to 64 age group. We feel that coincides with media use, which is typically heavier as people get older. That is, all media use, television, radio, and the newspapers and print media. This finding is consistent with national figures showing that people over 45 are among the heaviest and most consistent users of media, but a substantial number, 73%, between 16 and 24 know of the Coptic Church. Knowledge of church beliefs is a finding with which we had very consistent and over issues findings with regard to knowledge about what the Coptic Church stands for. We found that most people are large percent in our sample could identify what the church stated mission was. Now this 7% recognizes people, is not people agreeing with the church. The important finding here is their ability to pick out what the church's stated mission was. People over 45 were clearly the most skeptical, while younger people most easily identified the church's beliefs. Again, at the bottom of the page, you'll see, to provide further insight into people's understanding of the views held by the church, they were asked to indicate whether the church opposed or was in favor of number of practices. An overwhelming finding is that people know very little about the church's beliefs, as not sure, the not sure response accounts for the largest percentage of responses in each case. Not sure about adultery, 56%. Not sure about homosexuality, 63%. Not sure about using alcohol, 53%. And not sure about hard drugs, 46%. Using chemical-based medicines, 64% reported that they were not sure how the church felt about that. Clearly, those over 65 are least sure, and those in the 16 to 24 age group can more accurately report this church's issue. Hispanics report more uncertainty than either whites or blacks in almost every issue, and whites were more unsure than blacks of the church's position on those practices. The last section was sources of information about the church. When those who had heard of the church were asked where they first learned about it, 41% mentioned television, 44% said a newspaper article was their first source of information. For those over 65, expectedly, more of those, 62%, mentioned a newspaper article as the first source, and for twice as many as television, which was 29%. For people under 25, the emphasis was reversed, as you might expect. In that case, 43% reported TV news, and 26% cited newspaper articles as the first source. Clearly, there's a heavier dependence on electronic media among the young, as you might expect, because 53% of those 16 to 24 compared with 34% of those 65 and over learned from radio and television. When asked, when those people who had heard of the Coptic Church were asked to qualitatively evaluate the coverage given by the Miami news media, 42% think that the coverage that has been given to the Coptic Church was unfavorable, while only 9% thought it was favorable. 3% think the media is neutral, and 37% think the media coverage was neutral, and 12% are not sure. We hasten to point out that while the coverage was said to be unfavorable, we did not mean that for that to be construed as bias. We did not ask a biased question, so that is not to be included in this finding. The overall findings, as this survey points out, is that younger people, those of an up-tempo, upscale, who have had college education, those people who have incomes substantially higher, over $25,000 than the median, and those people who are just starting out in their jobs, making $15,000, between $75,000 and $115,000, tend to be the most liberal, and those people who would allow marijuana smoking, legalization, and cultivation, while the people who are older, we find Hispanic and the black communities being quite conservative, and I think that's in keeping with, again, age, lower income, not having attended college is a large amount, accounts for the retired people in Dade County, of which you have an enormous number. Okay. Questions?
Okay, in a nutshell, do you think that this poll that has been taken, does it show that there are changing attitudes towards the use legalization and general attitudes towards marijuana itself?
Yes, if you look at the age groups that continually favor or in favor of letting people use marijuana in their homes and are in favor of not bothering people, we have a clear division here. On the one hand, people are not in favor of the legalization of marijuana, the selling, the distribution of it. On the other hand, what they're saying is what people do in their own homes is their own business. And I think while they would not like to institutionalize marijuana, I think the way alcohol sales have been institutionalized, they're clearly not in favor of criminal penalties for those who use it. Clearly, and that's among the younger people. So if the answer to your question is yes, we're seeing, I think, a trend of liberalization as we climb up through those age groups.
Now, what about attitudes towards the use of alcohol and other drugs? You mentioned over-the-counter drugs, you mentioned barbiturates, you mentioned cocaine, you mentioned heroin, a few other things. What about attitudes towards these drugs and the way people look at them now?
Findings of this survey show that people overwhelmingly disapprove of using those over-the-counter, some of which are over-the-counter, some of which are not, drugs that for whom we were worrying in the late 60s that there was a great deal of abuse occurring, and find in 70, 80, 90%, depending on the age or demographic category, are not in favor of using hard drugs, and they're clearly suspicious of over-the-counter drugs. You see a clear suspicion that people can abuse and are abusing those as much as perhaps alcohol.
What about the comparison to pot to alcohol?
When you take hard drugs, and which we compared, and some sleeping pills and things of that sort, you'll see a hierarchy. Heroin, cocaine, and hallucinogens are clearly considered the most dangerous. Then you have sleeping pills and marijuana considered to be potentially of a problem, but not as serious a problem. So that while we might see that sleeping pills and a lot of diet pills or amphetamines would clearly be considered a more serious problem in their minds.
I'm wondering, sir, during this survey, did you talk to any physicians? Did you talk to any experts in the drug field? Did you talk to any government officials, or was this strictly done by a phone survey? Did you contact any experts?
The only way we would have talked to experts if they would have randomly occurred in our sample. This was clearly a sample of Dade County residents, and it would probably have the normal distribution of physicians and legislators, but not a panel of experts was not employed in this survey.
Have any of them reviewed your report yet? Has anyone else seen the report?
No, the report is being released today, so that it's clearly now public information, and people, it's in the public domain and are clearly welcome to look at it.
Mr. Donahue, repeated the question because of technical difficulties. What exactly does the report show insofar as attitudes towards pot and its usage and an age breakdown insofar as these attitudes are concerned?
Okay, clearly what we find is people having compartmentalized attitudes toward marijuana. And the compartmentalization can be viewed this way. While people do not favor the sale, the cultivation, the legalization of marijuana, on the other hand, they are not willing, or they are willing to allow people to determine to a large extent what they do in their own homes. And the second part of that compartmentalization, they're saying, yes, we'd not like the sale of marijuana legalized, but on the other hand, we'd like to see a lot of research to determine if it has medical applications beyond those that are currently allowed for the serious effects of chemotherapy and glaucoma. So again, they're saying here on one hand, we don't need any more controlled substances legalized. On the other hand, if we do not wish for people to be viewed as criminals who use it in their own homes. We favor lenient dealings with those kinds of those people, and we do favor medical research.
Well, what about the age breakdowns? I mean, are
Younger
the younger
people-
people in favor, or are they against? Are the older people in favor, or are they against? Is there a middle of the road, or what is there? What does the report show?
What the report shows is that across all groups, people are not in favor of legalization. The majority in each case is not in favor of legalization. But among subgroups, the younger people tend to report higher percentages of calling for legalization of personal use, of cultivation, and the like. So that we do see clear groups. We see that the Black and Hispanic communities tend to be very conservative in that regard.
Our newspaper was the first to publish the advertising and news stories of the Coptics, and we're predominantly 70%, I'd say, senior citizen. And our Brother Love at that time ran a series of ads, and the one that we got the most favorable reaction was the Encyclopedia Britannica ad showing the history of the Coptics. And I was wondering if they were going to pursue more factual type of advertising, more the history of the Coptics, because we got an excellent reaction. I thought, the phones would ring off in protest, but instead many of the people said, well, I'm learning about the Coptics for the first time. Remember, Brother Love, when I said, it's amazing because people had never heard of the Coptics, and for the first time it's like an educational experience.
See, he really doesn't have any knowledge about what I would be doing the advertising, but basically our thinking is this, is that there's a generation gap in America that's caused a lot of heartaches, a lot of people are in jail, a lot of homes are broken up, and it's all because of misunderstanding. And one of the things that we tried to show, and I think I'm sure the poll does indicate, is that people of all ages...
Brother Love, you're going to have to get to the mic, brother. I mean, if you're going to make some statements.
Well, that is the question I'd like to ask. Are you going to pursue that method of that approach?
No, the thing that we're fighting against in our society today is a generation gap. And that's been caused by misunderstanding. People of every age, according to the survey, of every age, of every background, of every political calling, all agree that alcohol is very dangerous. People of every age and every religion also agree that chemical drugs and over-the-counter drugs are very dangerous. The older people, according to the survey, especially the elderly people, say that marijuana is more dangerous than alcohol by a 2-to-1 margin. The younger people, by a 2-to-1 margin on the same question, say alcohol is more dangerous than marijuana. So if you're looking for one of the causes of the generation gap, it's not alcohol because everybody agrees that's dangerous. It's not drugs, everybody agrees they're dangerous. Yet within the marijuana issue, there's a direct clash between the views of the older people and the views of the younger people. And our purpose is to close that gap. We're not looking to widen the gap. We're not looking for cops and robbers types excitement. We're looking for education and understanding to close that gap so that we will all be of one mind concerning marijuana, what it really is.
Brother Love, just to dovetail that question now, do you think this survey Do you think it points out ignorance by most people, or people don't care? Generally,
There were parts to it. Are you talking about the marijuana issue or the Coptic Church issue?
I'm talking about, it's a combination of both, really.
Well,
The marijuana is very important as far as the Coptic Church is concerned. I mean, there's a direct...
There's an attitude amongst the people, as Mr. Donahue pointed out, that the average person in Dade County does not favor the police busting into people's homes and calling people criminals for marijuana use. The legislative people have said we want to change the amount and maybe give away some for medicine, but the legislative change is way behind the will of the people. As far as the ignorance, the only ignorance that was really brought forth, if you study the survey, was that almost 75% of the people, in every question the Harris people asked concerning the habits, such as adultery, homosexuality, drugs, and what have you, the people were overwhelmingly either wrong or did not know that there was a set of people who use marijuana who also have these traditional biblical views and values. And we looked upon that as a part of the responsibility of that is on the Miami media. Because of our frequent meetings, most of you know how we stand on these different issues. The courts know how we stand on these different issues. The courts realize we are a valuable asset to the community, and the fact that we're before the Supreme Court right now. And the media has made 80 to 90% of the people in Dade County aware of our existence, but only a handful are aware of our purpose. And our purpose is to close that gap, to join the hearts of the fathers to the hearts of the sons, and to eliminate the misunderstanding over marijuana. And that was the main purpose of the survey.
Brother Love, now that you've got the results of the survey, what happens next? What are you going to do as the official head of the church in order to spread the word that's in the poll? And what are you going to try to do in order to make your changes and to bridge that gap? In other words, what are the poll? Why this poll? What is it going to be used for?
This poll is not meant for any one specific purpose, like to be used as evidence in any one particular court case. However, we do have a matter before the Supreme Court of Florida. It's highly likely that that case will wind up in Washington. We also have presented various documents and appeals to the United Nations and to the World Council of Churches to consider our position in our community and in our country. And one of the purposes of this poll is to show a division between what the legislators are enacting and what the people are asking for. There's a lot, the 80 to 90%, I think Mr. Donahue said, of the people favor more research, which would bring about more understanding concerning marijuana.
So what you're saying is that you're going to use the poll to give a foundation to a particular lobby, maybe?
No, not that. This poll is something that is free information. Many other people, such as Normal and other groups, will point to it in later material that they produce saying, as a result of a Dade County survey, this has been reflected by the people. But as far as me having a specific goal and purpose for this, my purpose was to bring to light the division between the views of the people and the activities of the legislature. And also we were positive beforehand that the poll would show a large number of people in Miami have heard of the Coptic Church, but very few understand our sincerity. The reason for that is this. Most people in Miami have heard of the Coptic Church as though we were like a cops and robbers or Robin Hood type thing, and little more than that. Yet on the other hand, they've heard that the state Supreme Court has ruled that we are a church within the meaning of the First Amendment to the Constitution. So it's hard for the people to understand how the court could hold us in that high regard when all they've ever heard about us is the police raided the Coptics, the tax man sent a bill to the Coptics, the IRS is at the Coptic house today. And the only part of reporting that's reached the people has been that excitement type reporting. And as far as what we're going to do in the future, we're going to eliminate that. And if there is any rapport and dealings with the media in Miami, it would have to be on forums where there would be a chance to elaborate and bring forth, discuss issues, not just a 30-second news clip.
Why was Dade County used in the poll? Why not the entire state of Florida? Because you've got a very strong conservative element up north. Why not include that element?
This was our first experience in any poll taking. We had a choice of Dade County, the state of Florida, or even the entire United States, and we chose Dade County because we live in Dade County and because we wanted to establish the Coptic Church part, which is a Dade County issue right now, but we expect it to go much further than that.
How much did the poll cost?
That's I don't see any reason for talking about that.
In the thousands of dollars, hundreds of dollars?
It's a normal survey or the normal contract with us and the Harris people.
Where did the money come from for the survey?
The Coptic Church.
Coptic Church here, the Coptic Church in Jamaica?
When we talk of the Coptic Church, we're talking about the Ethiopian Zion Coptic Church, which is a worldwide organization that is headquartered in Jamaica, yes. But the thing that when you say what will come of this, I pray that what will come of this will be more understanding of what marijuana really is and what value it can have to the people. And that this frightened aspect of the older people being seriously frightened about something that the younger people have accepted as a normal part of their lives, we want to close that gap. And anything we can do towards that, we consider to be a valuable service.
Thank you, Brother Love.
Brother Love, does the survey show what you thought? Are the results what you expected?
The only thing that I think is with the survey that I would find fault with, and if I had a choice to do it again, I would do it a different way, is that when we asked the people, do you smoke marijuana? The responses were ridiculously out of proportion to what we know was reality. And I think that by putting the people on the defensive like that, and people get a phone call, they don't know who it is, a lot of people are reluctant to say, yes, I use marijuana.
How would you ask the question? How would you?
I would not include it.
If you had to do it all over again, how would you do it, as far as your whole thing?
The whole thing?
Yeah.
No, I would structure the questions in such a way that the people would be more free to answer the questions without, and the way I would achieve that is I wouldn't ask any direct questions. Do you do this? Do you do that? I would ask them, how do you feel about the community at large favoring a movement in this direction as opposed to that direction?
Have you expressed that with the posters?
We've talked, and it's been a very enjoyable association, and I'm sure we'll be doing things in the future.
Brother Love, aside from the one answer that you gave me, were the results as you expected them to be?
Yeah.
Then were you?
Especially about the medical part and the overall acceptance of the young people, and that the society in general is tired of trying to classify marijuana along with the crime and cops and robbers business. It's a big burden on the society, you know. One point that Mr. Donahue was making also is that, and I would have phrased this other question differently, when you ask people about, do you want to see marijuana legalized? Some people who want to see marijuana used will answer no to that question, because in their frame of thinking they're saying, you mean let the government control it? No, no, no. So even that question there could have been divided up and asked more directly.
You just keep it. Now I have a couple, just so our cameraman can get some cut shots.
Any plans for another poll?
Beg your pardon?
Any plans for another poll?
Excuse me, not in the immediate future, but we're happy with this.
Just elaborate, if you will, further. You said that organizations like NORM will probably want to use the poll and that sort of a thing. What significance do you attach to this poll? I mean, you really think it's...
I have no political affiliations whatsoever.
Yeah.
I don't support or fight against any party. I don't contribute or act in any campaign. I never have and I never will. There are many people that are trying to go through the political arena to bring forth change. People such as Normal and Camp and other organizations such as that, and to them, something like this would be ammunition to go to the legislative body and say, do you see this? 90% of the people say that you should be giving it, you should be dispensing it for cancer and for glaucoma, not just passing a law that says you will and then not doing it. And in other areas, when you ask 800 people a question, and 49% say that there should be no criminal penalties against it, and 44% say they should remain as they are, that means that the majority of the people want to see the law change. And yet the majority of the legislators don't, because if they did, the laws would change. And a large number of people who are called criminal only because of marijuana use would come right out of jail and no longer be called criminal.
You'd be surprised if people don't really take this poll seriously?
Anybody that didn't take it seriously would be an idiot, because it's a serious undertaking. As far as, do you mean the results don't indicate that the law should change? No, I wouldn't be surprised by that. I know who I'm fighting against in this battle and this warfare, and it's misunderstanding. And for whatever value people would put on an association between us and the Harris people to bring forth these results,
It's a very serious undertaking to give the people a reflection of their own. When you talked about ignorance, really helpful, yes, we should find out. So this thinking about the reefer madness element and people thinking about you smoke marijuana and then you're going to get an axe and chop off your father's head, that's pretty much destroyed. But the people still don't have the focus of what marijuana really is. This poll will not give it to them.
Was there any difference or any variables between Miami Beach and the rest of Dade County?
That was not one of the variables that we controlled for. One of the reasons for that is when you begin to get around the fringes of any area that small, unless you've done the interviewing in person and can say, I went to this neighborhood in this particular section of town, phone exchanges then sometimes are systematically assigned, but not that scientifically.
This was all done from New York via the telephone.
Because usually the beach is a little more liberal than the rest of Dade County on most issues.
Right.
And I was just curious as to...
One thing about these surveys is that, and I'm not sure, Mr. Donahue, I'm sure knows the direct particulars, but there are instances where the reliability and the accuracy of these surveys is such that they're admitted court evidence in different court matters. And when you have that type of arrangement, the Harris people provide a representative who comes in and gives the judge a much more detailed description of how they arrived at their figures, what their track record is from behind, and how that their figures are accurate within a 2 to 3 or 4% business. I'm telling you that more to show you the integrity and seriousness of the Harris people.
And you're really counting on this as ammunition when you're in court as a legal document. I mean, you're really counting on this poll.
My purpose right now, I couldn't say I'm going to do exactly this, but I know we're going to be in Washington before this year is over because of the activity in Tallahassee. We've already been talking and writing back and forth with the World Council of Churches, and my purpose is that when we have our meetings with those bodies, we're trying to present the marijuana question to them also, not just to the local courts.
So what you're saying is you think the state Supreme Court is gonna rule against you? And
No, not one bit. But
So you're gonna
that's
be
not
in
the end of the...
Washington?
No, if they rule for us,
Yeah.
I'm fairly certain that the Dade County State Attorney will take it to Washington.
oh, that's the appeal.
But remember, we were up there on May 10th. Mr. Booth was there. We had our oral argument. The thing has been done on an expedited basis, and yet we still haven't had a decision, which is indicative to us that they're considering it seriously.
Mr. Donahue, can I ask you, what was your reaction to being approached by the Coptic Church?
Having not heard of it, surprise.
You've never heard of it?
No.
Were you in New York? There's no local,
Not to my knowledge.
No.
No
Not
local.
in New York.
Was there a hesitancy to undertake this project?
One of the things that there was not hesitancy, but we did our homework and we checked out very carefully that any source for whom we do a poll that is not a nationally recognized source.
Yeah.
So we, and I personally made a lot of telephone calls to determine whether, because of the name of the integrity of the Harris name, could in some cases be tarnished. We decided to check our sources and always do very carefully before we do any poll.
What is the average cost or a guesstimate of a particular poll of this nature?
It's, without hesitating, that's Brothers Love's business to tell you or not to tell you how much the poll cost. A poll has
A poll of this nature, not this particular poll, but a poll of this nature, a guesstimate, a $5,000 figure. Yeah, ballpark figure.
That's a matter that we keep confidential with our clients.
Have you ever conducted a poll similar to this or about marijuana? Such a
As part of a national poll, yes.
Never in Dade County, never localized them.
I just think it would be in bad taste for me to tell something that he
Well,
would
the
not.
paper has written between 15 and 18,000, was it? According to the 21,000? Is that, Brother Love?
That's what
Is that an accurate figure?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or maybe
21,000?
Or maybe I should rephrase the question. If I wanted to do a survey like this, what would be the maximum you would charge me?
The maximum I would charge you, depending on how badly you wanted it done, no. It can range for a very, very quick poll. It can be low teens to middle 20s, depending on what you want to know and how hard it is to find the information.
Who pays the phone bill?
We do. We have the world's largest phone bill.
Okay, I need a phone,
So
Right here.
when you said that you checked out the Coptics, how did you go about doing that? You said something about checking to see if they were a nationally known source.
No, I said, when a source is not nationally known,
Oh, okay.
I call or have people in my division call to find out what they are about, if we are endangering our reputation by associating with them.
And you obviously thought you would not be doing that.
After I felt that was not the case after making 4 phone calls to Miami to sources whom I trusted. And it was at that time that I came to talk to them in the beginning of June.
Did you handle this whole thing?
Yes.
Were you in charge of this survey?
Yes, I even wrote the report, which I don't often do, but in this case I did, to make sure that it was, because the Coptics are an unconventional religious group, and because of the fact that I knew that the results were going to be looked at by both the Coptics as well as the news media and people in Dade County, I wanted to make sure that I had control over the aspect of it.
How long did it take you to complete the survey?
We did it over 2 weeks, in which we used a Wednesday to a Wednesday, so that we've got a bridge of a weekend in there as well. So it's 7 days to collect the information.
Do you normally get the whole thing written up this fast? It seems fast, but maybe that's your...
It's a relatively short poll. No, it usually takes a Harris survey about 12 to 14 weeks. But that's typically a longer one. This one was a 10-minute survey, 10-minute phone interview.
Oh, I see.
And typically a Harris survey of 800 calls or more would run 25 minutes or so. So that it would take twice as long to analyze the results.
Have any of you people ever been called at home by a survey like that? Curiosity?
Magazine surveys. They wanted to see if I saw a cigarette and...
I got one last week about new TV programs. Have you heard of any of these upcoming programs in the fall or something like that?
Mr. Donahue,
Yes.
in reference to the question asked earlier about checking out the Coptics before you took them as client, as a client type situation. In other words, let's say an organization contacted you and wanted a certain survey made, and you called and found out that the organization was like connected, let's say, with the mafia or some kind of an underworld organization. Your company then would not be involved with something like that?
We refuse routinely any inquiries like that, just out of course.
In other words, you're very selective about whom you
A
select.
Harris survey is, in that case, we're extremely selective about whom we do work.
Have you done work for other religious groups?
The largest study to my knowledge, that's ever been done on religious attitudes has been done by the Harris survey for the National Association of Christians and Jews, and I think that was a 77 survey about religious attitudes in the United States.
You therefore accepted, in this case, the Coptics as a church?
I was convinced upon checking with my sources that they were sincere in their beliefs, and so that I didn't feel that the Harris name was going to be used in any way that would tarnish our image.
What is your area of expertise? Are you a statistician or?
I'm nearly all of that. I have a PhD in social psychology, and my area of expertise is how various attitudes and specifically are affected by the media. So that my particular area of expertise is how the media, specifically broadcasting, tends to affect people's attitudes and impressions about things.
Traveling around the country and doing those types of things? Or?
Yes, I'm on my way to Chicago.
So that's pretty much how it's done, then you come down and kind of personally interview and then conduct everything from New York?
Yes,
just
we do.
very Israeli?
Well, it depends on what kind of survey you want. A long survey.
Yeah. Is that all you're gonna do? I mean,
You need to come over and look at it. This was just
oh, wow.
spiritual or moral message of the Coptic Church. And that message is that the people are destroying themselves daily by what they are doing under the name of free sexual promiscuity, by what they are eating, by what they are thinking, and by the idols and images and false gods that they are worshiping. None of this has been brought forth. All that's been brought forth has been Coptics and police, Coptics and taxman. That very limited part of our lives is magnified to the point that some people think that's all we deal with. Whereas that to us is an aggravation that we sometimes deal with. We are a church.
My only
According to the results of the poll, very
they
few
see it as
people know
unconventional.
what the church stands for.
My only thing was that much of it is
We were
distrust.
telling the media people that as the year developed, especially the television people and the Miami Herald people, that they were only looking for the sensational headlines and they were failing to tell the people that here's a set of people who smoke marijuana and maintain the standard biblical views against adultery, homosexuality, liquor, and what have you. That was never brought forth. So instead of the Coptic Church's position trying to narrow the generation gap, it's been used by the media almost as a wedge to widen it. Because the people have yet to understand that there's anybody who uses marijuana who has a foundation of the Bible and of the basic Christian belief.
Based on
What are your
things I've read, you're not.
What are your organization's plans to change this situation?
Christian belief.
Our life in America is more the life of a mission. Our foundation is in Jamaica. And in Jamaica, the Coptic Church is known as a model of black man's self-reliance. The ability of a group of people to have land, to bring forth the fruits of the land, to raise cattle, to be self-reliant amongst ourselves. In the Western Hemisphere, it's taken a long time for black men to achieve that status. And the head of the Coptic Church is black. The origins of the Coptic Church is black. I am a traveler and a sojourner who was adopted into this basically black faith. And our plans are that our life of living will be such a glorious example of the free thinking of the Coptics in accordance with the Scripture that many will change their lives and follow this pattern.
Again, what are your plans to change the image of the church projected by the media?
Most of what the people in Miami will be hearing about the Coptics will probably come from national reporting. Our case in Tallahassee is soon going to be in Washington. We petition the United Nations and the World Council of Churches for different meetings and what have you up in New York and in Geneva and different places. Because we're not sitting still with the marijuana issue. We're not sitting still waiting for a judge in Dade County to decide this or that. We're taking it to the highest courts that we can to talk with reasonable, rational, intelligent people, showing such things as the Harris Survey to document what we're saying.
Okay, that pretty much sums things up. However, it doesn't sound as though you're
I'm not looking
addressing-
for any converts, if that's what you mean.
Okay, it doesn't sound, your response doesn't sound as if you've addressed directly the problem of the image projected by the media of your organization, as you've just described. You said you've got a problem. I'm asking, what are you doing? What is the church going to try and change the image? What is your organization going to do, if anything?
When you mentioned problem, the better word would be we have a situation. And the situation is that the normal news reporting team, such as the individuals you saw here today, normally prepare a 30-second or a 1-minute news segment, and they try to cram all the excitement they can into that 1 minute. So we are eliminating that. This is like a farewell to that kind of exposure of the Coptic Church to Miami. The only things we would entertain in Miami would be programs where we would get to talk and reason and share ideas of a half-hour or an hour type program in Miami. Other than that, we're approaching the national agencies and the national bureaus with the marijuana problem, and there'll be very little heard about the Coptics in Miami.
Is this the first press conference you've had in Miami?
Well, we really wouldn't say I had this. This is Harris has set up. The answer is yes.
And this is...
There's been some at the house. There's been times when every arm of the media has been at our house at one time, but this is the first of this one.
So in other words, this is one way you're changing the situation.
This is one way that we're fighting against the ignorancy and the misunderstanding that's brought about the generation gap. We want to fight peacefully and diplomatically with words and reasons and understanding, and not radicalism or excitement.
Okay, what I want to make sure I understand is that through press conferences like this, through longer
I have no more
public
of these plans.
exposure,
Right. But I have no
to the
more of these
media.
plans as such.
Okay, this is one way the church is trying to change its image.
In other words, you're going to present yourself...
No, let me give it to you this way. We are taking our cause to the national and international bodies.
Through the courts.
Through the courts and through our publication, the Coptic Times, and through our thoughts. I mean, if I sit around all day thinking, what can I do in Dade County? I'm going to generate some Dade County interest. But when I start thinking, okay, what can I do with the World Council of Churches? What can I do with the United Nations? What can I do with the Geneva Conference? That's where we're going to start showing up, and that's where we're going to start having our thrust. So the people in Miami will hear about us the same way the people in Chicago will. In other words, I have a vision. I know certain things are coming down the road. We have a court case in Tallahassee right now that's a landmark marijuana case.
Can I ask exactly what the court case is at this point?
The question before the court there is whether the church, which has been recognized by the court as a religion within the meaning of the First Amendment. Judge Barrett made that specific finding of fact. He also found that the...
Pardon me, you said that that has already been made a specific fact?
Here in Dade County,
In
the
Dade
circuit
County,
court.
right. Now, why is that the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court?
We filed a petition for writ of certiorari, which is a type of appeal.
Oh.
We argued it on May 10th, and there were a couple of questions. The principal question was, should the Coptics be allowed to use marijuana, which is recognized to be their sacrament and essential to their religion, without fear of being arrested and thrown in jail. Now, the Supreme Court of the United States has not made any ruling on that question. The Supreme Court of Florida has not made any ruling on the use of marijuana by any particular group.
What did the date serve? Let me interrupt for a second, please. There's 3 tests to determine whether or not a petition that you make qualifies as a constitutional question. The first point is, are you talking about a church?
Right, and that's
The judge has to
settled, as I
determine
understand.
that. That has been settled.
That's not challenged by the state at all.
The second
Okay.
point is, are the people you're talking about sincere? That has been stipulated to by the state, by Dade County and the state attorney. The third point is what you're talking about essential? In other words, is marijuana an essential part of the Coptic doctrine? The state attorney has agreed to that. And up in the state Supreme Court, what they're considering